Thank you very much for rejoining us. I don't think there's any prohibition on coffee in the room, so if you really need your caffeine, please bring it with you and take a seat, because you really don't want to miss our next panel, because we have 1 hour to talk about shaping digital identity in the Web 4 era. That is plenary 2. I know, it's fabulous, isn't it? It's wonderful music to get us all started. We're going to talk about empowering and safeguarding individuals in the online world. And I know we're going to touch on the European Commission's 3 flagship initiatives: the European Digital Identity Regulation, reinforcing by the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure, and the Next Generation Internet. And if you were over in the far room, you will have seen videos identifying some of those projects on the big screen. We're going to look at this through the prism of the Web 4.0 era, but possibly also looking to the future as well. The panel is going to explore how these initiatives could steer technological developments towards social and environmental good, and all the warm, fuzzy feelings that we talked about on that last panel. We're going to hand over to Alex Grech, Executive Director of the 3CL Foundation, to moderate this. So Alex, if you want to grab a chair. And we have also got a great lineup of panelists as well. Henny Bolstra is stepping in at the last minute as Daniel is unwell. So Henny Bolstra, Innovation Lead at Duo. Henny, please join us. Thank you so much for jumping in at the last moment. From Gattaca, we have Irene Hernandez, who is the CEO with a lot of background and strong opinions. So please grab the stage. Irene, we look forward to hearing your thoughts. Paul Jackson is the Director of Digital Trust from the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat, which is the Canadian government, I think is fair to say, joining us online. Thank you very much for joining us, Paul. And last but not least, from the European Commission, no panel would be complete without a representative. Maya Madrid is a policy officer with expertise in all of these 3 initiatives we're talking about. So thank you all very much. Big warm welcome. Alex, I know you've a fine array of questions prepared for our panelists, but I do want to encourage everyone once again to put your questions on Participy, and also to put your hands up in the room when we get to that point. Please keep them short if you can, because we know that from the last panel we might run out of time. But Alex, over to you. Have fun.
Thank you. This is a panel about the present and the future. So maybe we should consider, seeing we talk about digital commons, it takes me back a while, I'm afraid, being old. Do you remember the term, technology is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral? It's one of the things which I had at the back of my mind. So if I look at the title, I'm going to go through them now. Shaping digital identity, whatever that is. Credentials, whatever those are. Web 4.0, even more confusing now these days. Empowerment, good luck. Safeguarding, safety, pretty awful. Individuals, whoever they happen to be, and the online world, that's pretty complicated, and back to the internet, I guess. Technically, I'm supposed to join the dots here, or these people are going to be joining the dots between the 3 flagship projects, which the EU is now investing time, money, and effort into. So we're talking about the European Digital Identity Regulation, the EUDI, what we call EBSI, the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure Project, and the Next Generation Internet. But I think what I didn't put down in terms of all of these things I was talking about was something called values. But I also want to pause on something which we don't often think about, and especially when I was speaking about, to you about Next Generation Internet. And I want to focus just for 2 minutes about not the technology, but the next generation. I teach these guys. So yesterday, I was teaching 65 people at the University of Malta, and there were kids from Hong Kong, Erasmus students, and I've set them a project at the moment, and I'm riffing off what Roberto Viola was saying, and it's called Resisting Apathy, Addressing Generational Divides. The kind of people I'm engaging with at the moment blame my generation for not getting it right, because those of us who fell in love with the internet 20 years ago, us who started with the various Harvard Rheingolds, are now the generation of the disappointed. No, we moved on to the other side. And we can all blame it on Silicon Valley, but that's where we are right now. I also want to focus on tangibles. It's what I'm hoping that I'm going to hear at the moment. I'm saying I have a bit of a vested interest in this because I am involved in EBSI. I am involved in an NGI project. I am involved in the DC4U, which is this large-scale pilot. I'll tell you why I'm involved. I'm the father of a 21-year-old who, at the age of 17, was booted out of his home in Malta, and being a bit academic, ended up at the University of Oxford. Good luck with proving your credentials from Malta in Oxford at the time when COVID happened. And from then on, and by the way, this guy, then there was a strike at Oxford, so not all of his grades were corrected, but in the meantime, he had an offer to go to Amsterdam. Good luck with getting your credentials accepted in Amsterdam, except that Oxford does have a blockchain system. And he had to pay about 20 euros to be able to get a list, a PDF, which then the Dutch had to decide whether they accepted or not. In the meantime, Jacob got a first class. But here he is again, saying, where do I go now? Do I become academic? Do I move countries? The portability of credentials, the migration of young people, is something which I think we should think about here, together with the whole notion of identity. In the old days, from a sociology point of view, identity was, I am not who I am whom you think I am. And that's something which I feel very nervous about, let alone that other people deciding who I am, because maybe I do know who I am, and I do want to have the power in my hands in terms of my credentials, which becomes a power tool in the 21st century. So anyway, I think that was my intro, and I want to start with Maya, because Maya's pretty much front line. So we're going to talk about frameworks, regulatory frameworks. So let's talk about the eIDAS framework at the moment. Why isn't it important? And then the one thing that most people are hearing about, which is the EU ID wallet.
Okay, so can you hear me well? Yeah? Sure. Okay, so first of all, I think that it might be good to explain what eIDAS is. So, because, I mean, we tend to talk as if everybody knows what we are talking about, but of course, when we are dealing with these topics regularly. So eIDAS is the regulation of the Commission on identity and trust services. So what is this regulation about? If you remember in the very first questions that were asked you about what do you expect from the next generation internet, and there was mention, and there was very big letters there. It was the word trust, and in the end, what the eIDAS regulation does is create a trust environment for electronic transactions, either in trust services or in electronic identification. You might or may not know that we are now under the revision of the eIDAS regulation. So there was one adopted in 2014. Now we are in the middle of the, well, not in the middle, hopefully in the end of the negotiations. But it was very, very important back in 2014 because it created really a framework of trust for the internal market, and it also allowed citizens to be identified in public services with your national ID in other member states. So this was a very first and important point that was covered by the eIDAS regulation, but now the future one, it also covers the gap, not covers the gap, but really evolves into this idea of human-centric, internet human-centric identity that is also promoted in a more high level, let's say, a strategy of the European Union that is set in the digital decade. That is, we need to provide our citizens with with a really human-centric identity mean that is secure and that is private for them to use it. So it is very important. It was very important at the moment, and it is also very important now because it will, let's say, be able to be used by citizens to be able to identify in a secure and really private manner.
Tell them about the wallets. Why is everybody talking about the EUDI wallet?
Okay, so I'm also recalling what was said before about we need regulation and we need tools. The wallet is a tool in the end. It's the tool that will allow citizens to identify. It's an identification means. So what the regulation says is that member states need to issue wallets to their citizens. Because if we only, let's say, we only say that, okay, everybody needs to have an EID mean, but we don't provide with an EID mean for citizens, then it will be kind of, let's say, only one part covered, not the two of them. So we have the regulation and we provide also the tool.
Okay, I want to take up this issue of the wallet, and I'm sure somebody will be asking some more questions about the wallet. Henny, who's obviously not Daniel, and he was literally knew that he was going to be doing this when he was on the train coming over here. But Henny is the co-convener of the EBSI, we used to call it the diplomas group, for all member states in Europe. One of the first applications for the European Blockchain Service Infrastructure Project was credentials, portability of credentials. So Henny, loaded question. How can EBSI support the delivery of the EUDI wallets?
Yeah, thank you, Alex, for this question. As Alex was saying, that I was on a train. I was supposed to be here as a guest and see where you end up as a panelist. As Alex is saying, I'm the co-convener of the European Blockchain Partnership, the diploma use case. And the diploma use case is, let's say, co-created through member states and European Commission. That's a very powerful combination, I would argue. What it delivers is EBSI. It's a European blockchain services infrastructure based on European values, based on new concepts. I would not use the word technology, but more concepts like verifiable credentials, self-sovereign identity, to give real power back to the citizens. And what that entails is that EBSI is Europeans, let's say answer, the third way answer to truly establish an infrastructure where people, like Alex's son or my son, if you want to go abroad, with his ID wallet can show what he or she is worth in terms of knowledge. So how does this support the European digital identity? You could say that EBSI is one of the first where we truly, let's say, experimented, learned from the pitfalls when using blockchain technology, and know a lot more than we did a couple of years ago. That it's not only about technology, it's about semantics, it's about legal, it's about governance, all the things also appropriate for digital commons. So what we do is that EBSI is now on the concept of trusted registries, decentralized trusted registries. It can be seen as one of the pillars for a European digital identity wallet. So you can envisage, let's say, the nearby future where you have, let's say, a hybrid scenario where you have centralized solutions and also decentralized solutions. And I think that EBSI is one of the most powerful answers to a truly decentralized model. And it's not only theory, but it's also covered in what we call an early adopters program. Now more than 100 actively engaged organizations, universities, public authorities, private partners, etc., to really pilot EBSI to be used in different areas. Education is one of them, but also social security is one of them. So that will be my answer, Alex.
Okay. I'm kind of interested in looking at how SMEs are going to fit in within the, this magic word called an ecosystem. We all use it, don't quite know what it means, really. So, Irene, if you can explain to me what your organization does, because you seem to have interacted with all of these initiatives, right? And also, I think, with Canada, because we still got Paul in the background looming there.
Sure, thank you, Alex. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. So I guess in this panel, in this conversation, I'm representing smaller innovation companies across Europe. And I would argue in particular those that have been part of the NGI community. So I'm personally a technologist, and within Gattaca, what we do is to build and offer decentralized digital identity technology. So at the core of what we do is really this belief that as we rely more and more on digital technology to do every essential aspects of our lives, that we really need an internet that it's really secure and that is privacy preserving. So I guess that our very strong commitment to open standards and interoperability has given us a trusting position as a partner in all of these different initiatives. So yes, for you to understand why I'm specifically here, on the one hand side, we've been accompanying the EBSI project almost from its beginning as domain experts consulting to the Commission and defining those technical specifications, but we've also provided technology to many of these early adopter projects. We were one of these very small batch of wallets that were certified, so we also experimented with that. And we're currently serving a leading role in the Vector Consortium that is contributing to the further development of EBSI. But at the same time, we were 2 times grantees of NGI, specifically of the SIF Lab project. We're currently applicants of another NGI project. I'm about to initiate a contractual relationship as NGI influencer. So I'm very, very fond of NGI and everything that it is achieving across Europe. We aim to be, of course, an eIDAS compliant solution. We're following very, very closely everything happening in the regulatory and technical aspects of eIDAS. And finally, here to link also with Paul and with Canada, we participated last year in the workshop conversations happening between ISET in Canada and DigiConnect in Europe, and getting a grasp of these interoperability requirements when we're talking about cross-border situations that do not involve Europe. So I hope to be here kind of a glued vision of all of these different initiatives, and I would say that at the same time providing some insider information of how like these smaller companies really can play a role in this whole ecosystem, being actively or directly impacted by all of this.
Okay, I want to bring Paul into the equation. Paul and I think, spoke earlier this week. I think we'd never met. And I'm also involved in looking at how EBSI can potentially be used in Canada. So Paul, your question is, why is it important for users to have international interoperability in digital credentials?
Well, the reason is because many users don't just limit their lives to just one jurisdiction. They're not just going to be in Canada. They're not just going to stay in just the European Union. Many will travel to countries around the world to go on vacation as part of their current job, or even to study or work abroad. And even when you look on the business side, they could expand to many other countries, export and sell their products and services around the world, or even import the key components and services they need from other countries. So there's a lot of travel, a lot of trade, and a lot of other activities that are across many jurisdictions. Now with digital credentials, right now, a lot of these things are relying on the physical world, but with digital credentials, this can make it faster, easier, more secure, and even more privacy preserving. So a lot of these transactions require key documents and information to be shared. If you can do that as digital credentials, this can make it much, as said before, much easier, faster, and more secure. Now, that's only possible if there's actual mutual acceptance and interoperability between jurisdictions. If for instance, the technology is not able to talk to one another, then the digital can't work. And same with, if we can't trust each other's technologies, our digital credentials, even our digital wallets, again, we would have to revert to the physical world because we wouldn't trust the digital means. So if we want to have that those digitally enabled cross-jurisdiction transactions, such as travel and trade, then we are going to need that international mutual acceptance and interoperability to achieve that.
Interoperability is a loaded word, no? And we kind of think that it's about technology, but really is this about, Paul keeps on mentioning jurisdictions, and jurisdictions often imply policymakers, governments, people within universities, for example, in terms of digital credentials, who can make or break this. People who may say, I only believe in federated, centralized databases, I will not trust the blockchain, go away, for instance. I think one of the interesting things about EBSI has been that EBSI has been built actually in the real world. Remember that when it comes to the education sector, there is no such a thing as a uniform education system across member states. Every single member state does what it does. And countries, large countries, have their own separate federated systems within that. So what I have at the back of my mind is the EU creating infrastructure as a public good, technically. Regulation coming in, looking at identity and self-sovereign identity, and in a way we haven't spoken enough about that because it's something that we kind of riff off, but saying that my identity belongs to me in the same way that the credential belongs to me, not the issuing entity, for instance. So this is where I want to come back to you, Maya, because in a way, you know, the IDAS framework, I think still people are trying to get used to what's behind it. So how does IDAS integrate this innovation that we're talking about in terms of both NGI, the next generation internet, looking into the future, looking at what Web 4.0 is going to be doing, and these EBSI stakeholders, you know, from EBSI 1, I guess, to EBSI 2, maybe you can tell us about what's changed in digital wallets and everything else in between.
Yeah, okay, so I would like to explain a bit what is happening now and how is the development of the European, let's call it European identity framework rather than wallet, because I agree that wallet, it restricts a bit what we are talking about because we are not talking about only the application that the citizen will use, but all the ecosystem, all the participants in the system that needs to be there to be able to use the wallet. So now we are tackling with two main parts of the development. One is the legislation, the other one is the technical development and implementation. And who is dealing with this development, in fact, is as my director was saying before, it's a common effort by member states. It's not only Commission who is developing this thing, but experts from member states nominated. We ask them to nominate experts to be able to build this system that supports, in fact, in the NDI regulation. So we have the experts there, but we don't intend this to be a closed project that will only be supervised by the people that now are working in. So from the NGI part, and I can just, I'm reassured by the words of Roberto Viola before, so we need to have the input from external entities, and we need to have your input because you are the ones that are looking at the future. So for the moment, it's not, well, there's a first version of the architectural reference framework published that you can already take a look in GitHub, but it will be published further versions of this document. That is how the wallet will look like in the technical architecture, but also the reference implementation that is in implementation that is also being developed based on the architectural reference framework will be published and will be open source for everybody to take a look and to, of course, provide all the comments that you might have. And we not only welcome but encourage you to please take a look whenever it's out and to provide all the feedback that you can give, because in the end, it's what it has been said before. I mean, probably it won't be the best wallet ever when it goes out, but to make the best of it, we will need to have the input from your side. And in what relates to EBSI, I mean, this is a special relationship that we have with them because apart from the reference implementation and the architectural reference framework that we are working on, there are also, as has been mentioned before, large-scale pilots that are working to test the wallet in different use cases. And one of the large-scale pilots, as Henny has mentioned before, is testing, in fact, the wallet with the EBSI trust framework behind.
I'm keeping an eye on the questions, and there aren't many, but they're kind of critical, I think. One of them is about eIDAS, government surveillance systems, Big Brother watching over you in relation to what I think the internet was supposed to be. And from my point of view, we started this whole thing about look what Silicon Valley did to us, or TikTok did to us, and we're going to do something else, I think. And so this, when we're talking about, this is a common critique that people who are in the regulation business don't understand technology well enough. And I'm just putting it out there, and I'm not asking you to react to it as such, but I'm also interested in the fact that you have SMEs who are involved in the process of building infrastructure as a public good. And then the second question, which again is going to bring me to Henny, is blockchain was very sexy about 3 years ago, wasn't it? 4 years ago? And then it's not sexy anymore. And I think having seen a lot of this stuff, normally when technology goes quiet is when interesting things start to happen with it. And that's my gut feeling with what's happening with the blockchain. But I think, Henny, do we really need blockchain in permissioned or decentralized systems to facilitate, again, self-sovereign identity on the basis that we're all on the same page, empowering the end citizen?
Yeah, that's of course a very, let's say, binary question. And I could say that it depends. That's the diplomatic answer. Yeah. To be honest, I'm not a disciple, I'm not a prophet about blockchain, but I think the combination of a couple of concepts, like trusted registries together with a blockchain infrastructure and the user protocols. And by the way, I'm not very into the protocol layers, but I think I do have a grasp on how they work, but I'm not an expert on that, keep that in mind. Together with verifiable credentials and together with the self-sovereign identity concepts we were talking about, it makes it a very strong combination. But is it absolutely necessary? No. You can organize it in a different way. That can be. But from in the European perspective, you can what you can do as a citizen is that by the use of blockchain, the EBSI, you can use your EBSI wallet and show your credentials and go from the University of Oxford to the University of, let's say, of Malta, of Göteborg, or Amsterdam, or the most beautiful city in the Netherlands, Groningen. Also possible. So I think the question here is that is stated here is it's pinpointing. I think it's pinpointing the technology or the protocol, and I think it's far more complex than that. It's about interoperability, and I think the combination of what I just said and the verified credentials, trusted registries, decentralized governance. I think that is truly a strong combination. So that would be my answer.
So do you always have to use blockchain? No. Do we believe in decentralization? Good question. Do we believe in self-sovereign identity? Equally good question. Key people from a legal perspective and a governance perspective. Governance normally implies centralization, doesn't it? Self-sovereign identity implies power to the end citizen. There's a bit of a tension there. And yet, sometimes miracles do happen. And some of the pilots, not just within EBSI, I mean, I project managed the first nation state use of blockchain credentials in my tiny country. And I had a minister who said, I don't care about the technology. Is this good for the end user, students? 1. 2, is the technology ready? 2. 3, who's going to be doing this? In our case, it was pre-EBSI, it was MIT Media Lab and whatever it is. And 4, on your head be it, let's move with it and see what happens. Still in pilot stage, in a kind of small country like mine, everybody's using it in terms of we've gone from paper to PDF to somebody saying, here's, check my credentials on Blockcerts, okay? But I keep on going back to the root of the problem. On whose side are we on? Because this is something which big projects, LSPs, anything, I think, has to address. So, Irene, let's go back to you now. Because I am interested in SMEs. Why are you flying the flag if you're here with these big guys, basically? What can SMEs contribute to the future of digital identity? And what challenges do you see in terms of how you guys participate in delivering whatever you're doing within NGI or elsewhere?
Thank you, Alex. So I think that SMEs so far have played already a very critical role in this whole digital identity ecosystem, user-centric digital identity ecosystem. So to start, if you look at the profile of companies, and I'm talking more from the technology perspective, if you look at the profile of companies that have been working the longest in the space, they're SMEs. There's small innovation companies, startups across the world. And I would summarize the contribution so far perhaps in 3 main aspects. The first one is that SMEs have been delivering the most mature, up-to-date technology offerings. So we're known to be more agile, more flexible, we can adapt quicker. And that's very important, believe me, in current market conditions, because specifications, standards, they're changing constantly, sometimes with breaking changes. So we really need to act quickly and deliver the technology that is being demanded and adapt it quickly to ever-changing needs. But secondly, I think that this is a very important part. We've been very active contributors and promoters of open standards. And that, for me, is essential to achieving interoperability. So we've provided experts into the market. We've worked, collaborated actively, and I can really attest to that personally, with governments, with policymakers, in ensuring that all of these that we're building is truly interoperable. And perhaps I would add that we are activists in privacy, in really advocating for a solution that is private for the citizen. This user-centric focus has been truly important in SMEs. And perhaps lastly, so far, we've been perhaps driving market adoption. We've been explored use cases. We've been educating the audience. We've been developing high-quality specialized content, material, delivering workshops, implementing pilot projects. So that experience is really contributing to getting this market up and running. Perhaps the most timely question is, okay, like 5-6 years down the road, it is now clear that decentralized, user-centric digital identities have attracted a lot of attention from many organizations across the world. So the question is, what role should we play moving forward? What role can we play moving forward? I do believe that we will still contribute to all the 3 points that I mentioned before. Perhaps the companies that have been longer in the space and know how to execute well will grow, perhaps bigger and have a bigger impact in everything that we do. And smaller entrants perhaps try to tackle niche markets and industries, perhaps some consolidation in the market, some acquisition. It's really a little bit early to know what role we are able to do. So yeah, challenges many. Let me summarize. Like, it is clear that policy definition in the different jurisdiction, not only at European level, but then, at country level, will impact either positively or negatively on the role of SMEs, either because we are creating, let's say, a competitive market of many solutions and providing choices, technology speaking to citizens, or because we're creating more a consolidated market with very few approved, let's say, options. So that will impact. If I have to say very concrete challenges, I would say one is accessibility to public and private procurement processes, because if they are defined by design to have requirements such as you need to have sizable track records, or you need to have a down payment of a very large security deposit, well, that will be effectively creeping accessibility to smaller companies, especially new entrants. But then we have other effects, like it's going to be EIDAS certification, just to put an example in Europe. Is it going to be this certification very resource consuming in terms of the time it takes us to achieve it, or the out of the pocket money that we really need to put into getting that, or resources, human resources needed to achieve it. So there are a lot of moving drivers that are yet a little bit too early to understand, because it will depend on how each different jurisdiction will react to the idea.
Second time you mentioned too early, that we need to wait kind of thing, or we need to see where we are at the moment, right? This thing about we're trying things out, we're piloting things out, sandbox status, that's...
I think we're already crossing the chasm in the sense that we've been working on pilot, perhaps non-production environments for over 3-4 years. And now we particularly are already working on production projects, like production-ready projects that are being used in real life. So we're already transitioning to the next phase.
I'm going to go back to Paul, because one of my first curiosity was like, why is Canada looking at what's happening here? Why Canada and Europe are talking to each other? But it did go back to what we mean by interoperability or international interoperability. And I would ask Paul to, explain a bit more about Canada's interest in what's happening, I guess, from this perspective, even from the perspective of the NGI. And I think, but specifically in terms of digital credentials, it's too late, almost. And one of my frustrations is there are kids all the time, traveling now, all the time, facing expenses which they don't need to have, being asked to prove that they are who they are, people not believing them. Because guess what? Universities, TVET organizations are still bastions of resistance in many of these places. I know. I work for a university. Okay? So this is what I've got at the back of my mind. Paul, why is Canada looking at what Europe is doing, and how can we learn from each other? I think this is equally important.
Well, I think a way to look at it is, like as I mentioned before, certainly from a Canada standpoint, the people in our jurisdiction, as well as the businesses, they're not just limited to doing things in Canada. They quite often will travel to the European Union, or they can engage in business there as well, and other countries around the world. So I think that's where we can't just look at it purely from the Canadian perspective. There inevitably is going to be interactions, transactions that are going to happen across our jurisdictions. So if we try to do this independently, we don't talk to one another or don't try to find alignment, then we're going to end up with these siloed solutions where, sure, it may work great within our one jurisdiction, but it's going to run into a brick wall when it goes into another jurisdiction. So I think that's not helpful, because we can't say, okay, well, I can obtain government services in Canada, but, well, if I'm going to try to travel to Europe or travel to the US, well, sorry, you're kind of out of luck for the digital side of things. So I think that's where, to enable this to work digitally across borders, across our jurisdictions, we do have to work closely together, because there's kind of two key challenges to overcome here. One is going to be kind of more technology oriented. We have to be able to get these technologies to work together, and each of our jurisdictions are going to make different technology choices. But at the end of the day, it shouldn't be up to the travelers and the businesses and everything to try to navigate and make these things work together. Our jurisdictions should be working together to make sure that we can have our issuing and verifying capabilities, or even our digital wallets, be able to work together, so then a user can take the wallet and then be able to then present it, Canadian credentials in the European Union. But I think there's also, I think as you mentioned before, this is not just a technology problem. There's also a more policy-oriented challenge here, and I think this kind of falls on trust. Like, how can a jurisdiction trust and even accept, for instance, the digital credentials or digital wallets from another jurisdiction? So if, say, a Canadian traveler go to EU, how do you trust what they're presenting? How do you trust that wallet that they're coming with? How do you trust the credentials, the digital credentials that are held in that wallet when they're trying to present the various documents they need to go into the European Union and to, say, study at a university? I think these are very good questions. And I think that we don't want a situation where, because we don't trust each other's wallets, each other's credentials, either these poor travelers, students, or workers have to revert to physical credentials, where they're used to in their own jurisdiction doing everything digital, they have to go back with physical copies of things and present them manually to go to another jurisdiction. And often, as you mentioned, it can be very difficult to get a university to accept these things, particularly since they may not have any way of reliably verifying these physical things. So I think that's where we also don't want a situation where travelers have to juggle a bunch of different wallets, that you have to get a different wallet for every single jurisdiction you're going to be visiting. You don't want to have, and even then, if we don't accept one another, we actually create the impossible scenario for users. Say they go get their credentials in the digital wallet for their jurisdiction, go to another jurisdiction. Oh, sorry, I don't accept that digital wallet. Well, then they get the digital wallet from that jurisdiction, go back to their home jurisdiction to get their credentials again. Oh, sorry, I don't accept that wallet either. We've just forced the users to fall back to the physical approach as well. So unless we work together, it's not going to work digitally across our jurisdictions. So I think, now, how can we make this better? I think as a fundamental piece, I think we need to have the ways to be able to determine what meets requirements in our own jurisdictions. I think that as just kind of the most baseline. So I think I heard mention of certification of digital wallets. So have maybe standards or assessment programs to make it easy to determine what does and does not meet requirements in each of our jurisdictions. But then we actually have to work together to align those requirements. So then if the requirements are met in one jurisdiction, they will then be met in another jurisdiction, which makes it much easier, so then a user can choose one solution. But on top of that, this comes down to the mutual acceptance and trust. It's not just good enough that these requirements, like say a digital wallet can meet the requirements of both jurisdictions. We don't want to have a lot of duplicate effort and cost. But then forcing, say, a wallet provider to get certified in every single jurisdiction. That's where, like it's done for other things in the economy, we have to have a way to be able to accept, for instance, certification. So for instance, a certification done in the European Union, maybe there could be agreements that then they could be accepted in Canada and vice versa. So then a digital wallet or other technology for digital credentials can be certified in that one jurisdiction, but then accepted in many other jurisdictions. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to work together. We can make this much easier for end users and make this much easier for those who are providing these products and services to enable this more ecosystem, this more digital future. But it only will really work if the jurisdictions such as ours work together to iron out a lot of those challenges, address the technology challenges as well as the policy and acceptance challenges. And only together can we actually resolve this and make this a better experience across our jurisdictions.
So essentially we're talking about trust networks now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
yep.
EBSI is really being built on that basis, even trust registries. And it's being built on the reality of how things actually work in real life, as opposed to conceptually how should technology work, I think. Maybe that's a bit of a crude way of saying it. And that's why I think we were always arguing about what does interoperability mean. Because I do remember having arguments with people in an airport once, and their view of interoperability was the machines talk to each other. And then I said, I come from the business and education sector. Good luck. That's not the way it works. It doesn't work like that. So in a way, and I'm not saying that EBSI is the, going to solve everybody's problems, but I keep on going back to the real problem, which is what Paul is talking about, I think. There are people moving from one country to the other. I know, my son's just done it, and will do it again. His future is not in my country. I don't know where he's going to work in 6 months' time. And he always has to go and prove his credentials somewhere. If there's any blessed system that can stop this rubbish of intermediaries and gatekeepers getting involved and more money being paid so that there are people in jobs staying there, I think we should be looking at it as a collective. We were talking about the collective good. I think that's my 5 cents worth of it. There are some barbed questions here. I'm not even sure if they can be answered, but they're interesting ones. There's one saying, member states successfully lobbied against the wallet being certified to adhere to privacy standards under the GDPR. It is now up to them, up to member states, I guess, to decide whether the national wallet will be certified for privacy compliance. I mean, how can privacy be truly protected in this context? There's something for you?
Yeah, I guess that this one is for me. So what happens here is that, of course, I mean, the idea and what is the proposal behind the European Digital Identity Framework is to create something that it preserves privacy, and it also it's based on the highest security standards. So it is true that that for the moment there's no certification scheme for the wallet, because this is something at European level, because this is something that takes place, but will be in place in some, I hope, years, few. But now, until we have this certification scheme in place, it will rely on national certification schemes. But it doesn't mean that member states can do whatever they want, because apart from relying on national scheme, they will need to be scrutinized by other member states. So now, just for you to understand what we have now, when for the current eIDAS regulation, we have an identity scheme that joins the network, it should be reviewed by other member states. So this is going to happen also, until we have something common that are still under development. So this is the way that it will be, privacy will, and also security, I mean, certification will of course be looking at both things will be taking place. So there will be member states vigilating that everything it's how it should be.
I think we should take some questions here. Now, I can't see any of you because the lights are all here. I don't know. So I think we're going to need some help as to if anybody raises their hand. So Monique, I'm relying on you.
Yes, give me a mic. So
here, why don't you take that? Because we really can't see them.
An SME that has got some digital identity, but it's based on W3C standards and not the full EBSI standards. What's the future about possibly Europe changing the W3 standards to include more of its clauses?
I can take an answer on my perspective on that. Is that standards today for user-centric digital identity do not cover the full spectrum. That's a reality. To make it even more complicated, there are competing standards doing the same thing. And it is yet not clear whether there will be one winning solution or whether we should interoperate with different standards. eIDAS specifically, the first ARF version already contemplated W3C standards for the EUD wallet, specifically for the type 1 credentials, which are the most sensitive ones. So I do think in general that W3C standards, specifically verifiable credentials data model, are quasi a de facto standard already worldwide, because this is the standard that is being recognized and accepted in many, many different jurisdictions already. Now, this is only data model. Then you need to look at protocols, exchange protocols, and then the story gets a little bit more complicated. For us, this is where I said that agility, like being agile, is critical now. We've been changing and adapting and opening a super modular and flexible architecture so we could really tap into the different requirements. I don't expect to have in the very short term in the whole world one single set of standards for digital identities. We'll probably have to live with a few. Same way we have to live with backwards compatibility with existing systems. And that's a reality that we need to face.
Some more questions?
Yes. Please stand up. And
Say who you are.
Hello, my name is Nina. My question is, there is open source and markets that is already developing all these standards and being a bit in front already. So what do we do with this? Like, are we using any of this, or are we developing in parallel? Because there is a whole field that is underfunded developing this. And then we have now the official approach that is developing these things yet again. So I just wonder, how do these things fit together?
So the question is, are things being duplicated without being needed?
Well, in fact, it's not that it's duplicating, but member states, of course, will relay if they feel the standard fits the purpose. They will rely on existing standards. It's not that everything is brand new, and it's not, let's say, taking into account what has been developed anyhow. But I just want to remind, so it's not if there's a standard there, if when you look at the ARF that is published, you see that there's a better way, or there's something that really could be enhanced or whatever. The community is very open to comments from the, let's say, the outside member states that are developing the European Digital Identity Wallet.
I don't know if there's another question, but there's something here which there is?
There's a couple. This
Again, guys, I
here.
can't see you, so...
no problem, yeah, no problem. So hi, Cade Deem from New Design Congress. I actually wrote this in the chat thing, but I'll say it here as well. So over the past 10 years, we've seen an increase in the use of the awareness of security, and yet despite that, we see a major increase in, say, the economic damage of social engineering attacks that primarily rely upon digital identity systems. Why are we developing new digital identity systems with trust as a core focus when our primary threats are things like social engineering attacks or the data itself falling into the hands of people or governments or other institutions that weaponize that, for example, in use in genocide and things like that?
Yeah, you and I are looking at each other like...
I'm looking at you
wow.
Yeah,
you're looking at me and I'm mirroring you, basically, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of difficult question.
And I'm thinking of deep fakes and things like that at the moment, which is what's freaking me out, so...
Yeah. So how can I answer this? So in fact, so the objective of the regulation is to provide and to build trust. Whether a system it's a target of attacks, it needs to be tackled with how we protect that system and with security measures put in behind that. But of course, even though a system or identity systems would be, because I mean this is something that I really don't know, targets of attacks would mean that citizens don't need to have or to be offered an identity system that it's private, that protects the privacy, that it's secure, that enables them to access to private and public services, or to what you have mentioned a lot of times, so I can just move from one member state to another with all the burdensome that carries with me if I need to tell who I am and to be able to identify myself. So that would be my question. I mean, it was quite a difficult one.
Mm.
I'm Markus Romoser. I'm developing an activity observer, and so identity is of some importance here as well. I hear a technical discussion about identity, and I wonder, and even related to determining the value of a human at one point in the discussion. I found this quite troubling. This sentence. What would the life sciences and the social sciences say to such an identity concept? And what if an identity, there is no such thing as an identity that can move from scope to scope? So if the identity in one jurisdiction is not compatible with the identity in the other, should we try to tackle this as a problem, or should we just leave it? So are we solving a technical problem that's an underlying unsolvable social one?
So again,
I teach social science. I mean, I'm just a bit flummoxed at the moment, okay? Because I started by saying, I am not who I am whom you think I am, just to tell you how the social sciences looked at identity. Okay, so I think we get that. There are also a hell of a lot of people, say in places like India and Pakistan, that if they're not registered, they don't exist, I think. Within the EU, I think there is a concerted effort, I think, in terms of identity and using identity responsibly. For example, in terms of social security, that if I break my foot over here in Belgium, it would be nice that, I don't have any hassle in terms of bills at some stage, that I can immediately get with whatever system is going to be based, whether it's based on EBSI or something else, that this is seamless. I think that's the way I think we're seeing the application of identity. In terms of the philosophical aspect of identity, I'm very happy we can spend many hours gleefully debating it.
Sure, but I mean also it's not technical. It's not really technical, because at some point technical things can be solved. It's about how we build trust.
Yeah.
Because what needs to happen for me to be able to go to another jurisdiction and have accepted whatever I deliver, it's that the counterpart trusts me in this case, because it's human-centric. So first place me, and in the end, who has issued these credentials for me. So in the end, it's everything about how we build trust, how we put in place a governance that it's able to build trust between the different, entities in the ecosystem that we are talking about.
We've got 3 minutes left. So this is sound bites from each and one of you. We can riff whatever you want, okay? But in terms of challenges and your vision for what can happen in the future of digital identity, and somebody here said 2 words. And you can contemplate that, but.
I will nail it down to one. For me, it's interoperability. It is the challenge, and Paul is an attestation to that. He has been reinforcing the message all along, because in the end, if we think about why we're building all of this, is so that we as individuals can have one single an easy mean to identify ourselves, to provide the trust Maya is talking about whenever I do a transaction. But it happens that I'm an individual that perform transactions across very different industries, across very different countries along my professional and personal life. So it is a reality that if we want to do this right, we need to make this happen with interoperability at its core. And it's really not an easy problem to fix. For me, interoperability has three main aspects, like geographical interoperability, technological interoperability, and vendor interoperability. So I will stop it there, but interoperability is something that you need to keep in mind in terms of challenges.
Paul, I'm going to bring you in because you've been listening to all of this, and maybe you're starting to think Europe is a really complicated place compared to Canada, but...
Yeah, well, I think Canada is probably equally complicated. We've got multiple levels of government as well. But I think building on what Irene said, I agree with the interoperability, but I think it's also kind of the more trust and mutual acceptance side of things. I think these are things that we have to tackle both getting the tech to work together, but also people to trust one another. Because to me, the ideal future would be where individuals and businesses can use their digital credentials to obtain services, engage in transactions across jurisdictions, using the trusted digital wallet of their choice. So it's easy. They don't have to juggle multiple different wallets, credentials across them. They can go across each of these different jurisdictions, get their digital credentials in that same wallet, and then be able to obtain those services and engage in transactions across them, which would make it very easy for someone that's trying to travel and go between different countries around the world. So for me, yeah, add on mutual acceptance, because you got to cover the policy and the trust side of things.
Henny, Maya, literally 20 seconds.
I can't say interoperability because it's said twice. So I bring in one other term, and it's adoption. Adoption by business domains, adoption by people in the field, the end users and the stakeholders. We have to have the whole system working, not only a wallet, but all the stakeholders and actors to make this a success. And it's about adoption, and it is what we truly advocate also with EBSI. We have to learn and experiment and pilot and bring it to production and to gain critical mass to get that and to get things over the top.
Maya.
So for me, I mean, and it links really what Henny is saying, it's trust. I mean, and trust means also adoption. It's not only trust of the entities that participate in the ecosystem, but trust of the people that needs to, because in the end, this is a system for citizens on what AI does take. So it's trust from every entity that is participating in the framework.
I think we're done, guys. We're 56 seconds over. Okay, thank you very much.